Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. It is something that is on a lot of people's radars these days, and more cases are being diagnosed. I'm talking about ADHD, and not just for children. I'm hearing more and more adults, particularly women in their 30s and in their 40s, being diagnosed with ADHD. We're going to talk about that from the psychological standpoint with somebody that helps people with this and so much more. She's an author of 2 great books. She helps people all the time. She has so much insight, and she's back with us. Dr. Ann Creekmore is on the program. Hi, Ann. How are you?
Good, Steve. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you. Why do you think that more people are being diagnosed nowadays with ADHD? The number of cases could have been the same back in the day, but maybe it's more on our radar. What are your feelings?
Yeah, I think you made some good points. I mean, I think one is that it's just more on our radar. People are more open to, the concept of neurodivergence, right? And more aware of things. So that can be part of it. So I don't know, I think also that eating, I think protein and stuff is very important for brain functioning and the healthy stuff. And maybe it has something to do with that as well, as far as our, as far as just our environment and what we take in to our system could have something to do with it as well. That's just my opinion. You asked for it.
No, I appreciate that. And it definitely gives us something to think about there. When you mention protein, is it because people don't ingest enough protein in our diets nowadays, or is it the type of protein? Let's put the microscope on that.
Okay. Well, the hallmark of ADHD is impulsivity. And the idea is that the frontal lobes, executive functionings, where you think, thinking before acting, is just a little sluggish. Like the brain neurotransmitters are only flowing about 90% processing speed versus 100%. And they have found that, they have theories like, and there are different other types of ADHD too, which we can talk about as well. But generally, classic ADHD, as I call it now, even the inattentive type is called ADHD. The idea is that maybe the brain, the brain neurotransmitters are attached to fatty acids, or your kind of the omega-3s in your brain. And if you don't eat well if your brain for some reason isn't getting enough oxygen or nutrition or protein or whatever, then the idea is that or you don't absorb it as well, who knows, then that can affect your processing speed. And that's why they prescribe the stimulants or amphetamines, because then it will increase the processing speed. But then they also recommend that if you increase your protein or you increase your omega-3s, like in the fish oils, that to a certain level, they've actually had studies where they compared Ritalin with, I think it's 5,000 milligrams of the omega-3s within a fish oil daily. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of equally effective for that, because the brain neurotransmitters actually attach to the fatty acids in your brain. So if you increase and enrich your brain, it kind of is healing, and then everything is attaches and flows at the right level. Brain.
Interesting. I got back on fish oil about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more than that. I took it back in the day. I always wrestle with, I'm never sure how much I should take. I'm taking. Go ahead. You go ahead.
I know it's a really good question, because it actually is a lot, I think, according to the studies, because when they say 5,000 milligrams, they're not talking about the fish oil. That is 5,000 milligrams. They're talking about the omega-3s and so on within it to add to that level. And so when you actually try it, when you get a brand, for example, you can read, well, how much actually of the omegas is it per gel cap? because they're generally gel caps that you take. And then you have to kind of also look at the top of the back of the bottle and say, well, it's saying it has this much in it. Total omega is 750, let's just say, for example. Then you look up and then it says, oh, it's in 2 gel caps. So really you're talking about what, 375 or something in 1 gel cap. So if you're supposed to reach up to 5,000 for the ADHD, if to improve the ADHD, to reduce impulsivity, increase the focus memory, then you're talking about how many would that be? If it's at 350 in each one, you're talking like taking 14, 16 a day, which is a lot. So you have to really be particular and with your brand and so on. And there's also some vegan ones. Apparently, the fish oils to cross the blood-brain barrier. That's why it has to be so high. It does the cholesterol stuff or the circulatory stuff lower, but when you want it to cross the blood-brain barrier with the fish oil type, it's got to be a pretty high dose. Not that, and then of course you can add things like eating salmon. That's I think something that contains some of the highest protein content. Plus, it's got all the omega-3s in it. Things like that, can add in, but you really couldn't get enough if you look at a can of salmon to have
Totally.
it, to add up to that amount, but it'll help.
For me personally, here's the reason why I stopped taking it, because I got a couple of nosebleeds, because it does thin your blood,
Yes,
which is a good thing.
correct. Right. You have to watch the side effects of anything. Even things you eat or supplements can have side effects as well. So it's finding that right balance.
And I would get the same thing if I take a, certain pain reliever. I was getting confused which one thins your blood, Tylenol, Advil. I think it's Advil. I don't know. I don't take any of them anyway.
Right.
But
Correct.
the couple of times I did, that's what happened. So now it's always on my radar. And then I went back to fish oil, and I believe I'm taking 2 1,000 milligram capsules. Whatever that means. I don't have any nosebleed problems, so I guess it's okay.
Right, exactly. So it agrees with you, and that's what you you want to take it for the purpose, but it also has to agree with your body, and you the only one who can tell what's happening. I'm familiar too with another omega-3 that's a vegan type. I think it has a little krill or something in it, but it's mostly
krill oil. Yes.
Vegan one. Yeah, and it's called. I'll just mention, just because I've had a lot of clients that really seem to respond to that, and you can get it through Amazon like everything else, and which is great. And it is called Accentrate, like accent rate, ACCENTRATE. And it has, I think, a little vitamin D, which is really good for fatigue. A lot of people are deficient in vitamin D. A little B, the B vitamins are good for your brain and your nervous system. And then it's got a vegan type of the omegas, so that it crosses over without having to reach that massive level through the fish oil way. So that's a good, and they're for children and for adults. They have gummies, and that can be a good way for the increasing your omegas.
Well, a couple of thoughts on what you just said, Anne. You mentioned, I thought you said krill, and
Correct.
Some nutritionists tell me krill oil, which is a shellfish, as I understand
Correct.
it. I'm not a big seafood guy, is better than fish oil. But above all of that, whatever you take in terms of fish oil, krill oil, you have to make sure that it's of high quality. I've been told by nutrition experts, you can't just walk into any pharmacy and just say, oh, let me grab this off the shelf. You have to use certain brands if you really want to get maximum potency out of it. And you just said vitamin D. I was, over the summer, I took a routine blood test, deficient in vitamin D, to the point where the doctor said, this is the lowest we've ever seen. We've never seen it.
No.
Yeah. And then when I thought about it, I was feeling lethargic. I was feeling like brain fog, and just wasn't
right. It's amazing, how much it can affect you if you're deficient in vitamin D.
Who would even think? It's
now we're getting to know these things, kind of like we're getting more knowledgeable about how to help ourselves.
The thing, vitamin D, many don't realize, and I didn't either until I talked to the doctor, is that you need vitamin D in a correct level because it helps you absorb other vitamins.
Right, correct.
Critical, essential. So
Right.
yeah, you got these things you got to watch.
Exactly. And that's a good point. Like with vitamin B, from what I understand, from the integrative physicians, that, some people like just take like a B12 or something, but you have to take it within the context of B complex in order for it to work, for it all to absorb. Or likewise, like if you want to take calcium, you're going to have like a 2-to-1 with the magnesium for the calcium to be absorbed. There's a lot of things. That's why it's so good if you can have both a regular, a traditional physician who's spent all that training and experience on knowing, the body and what medications help or surgeries or whatever. And then you also have your complementary or your integrative physicians that have gotten the extra specialty in all the health, nutrition, vitamins, supplements, the research on it, and the brands and all that. And then you're kind of bringing it together so you can get the care for your health, that fully for your health that way. And that's where you kind of learn those things.
Well, we pivoted for just a couple of minutes here, but
Yes.
rightfully so, because all of this comes into play, even for somebody that is challenged by, or somebody in your life challenged by ADHD in terms of proper nutrition. How about some of the other things that you can share with us when it comes to ADHD?
Right. And also they found, that people have allergies, to just stay a little bit with that, just one for a little more, just that, we can have allergies, skin allergies. We can you see me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, good. And so just watching to see what things kind of trigger, fogginess and stuff like that, can observe your body and what you eat, and see what affects you and what makes you feel good. Certain foods you find, can make you feel energetic, and other ones make you feel logy, and kind of be aware of that as well. The idea is that, though, to get back to the topic of, the hallmark feature of ADHD is impulsivity. That's the issue. People, when if you have that, they tend to do things impulsively without thinking before acting. So there's a lot of strategies to use to kind of slow yourself down, and so you may kind of like be moving, but not really thinking about what you're supposed to be doing. So you can, just basic stuff like keep lists. It can help, just to have lists at different areas so you don't forget something, like your list before work or your list for work, and just kind of keep yourself on track with just signs for, like, if you have a family member that is very forgetful or ADD, like how it does help sometimes just have some basic signs up, just like when we're starting a new habit, right, to kind of a little post-it or an affirmation or mantra for something. But just small things like, even at the door, don't forget, and then has a little list of the things you don't want to forget there. So just to kind of keep insight in mind, kind of things.
Is there also people who struggle with ADHD, the procrastination portion of it as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because there's different types of ADHD, like, Dr. Daniel Amen, he has some ADHD centers, as well as he has also the kind of the integrative centers. He's a psychiatrist. He does the brain specs for, just seeing what's happening in the brain for different types of conditions. Then I'm sorry, now I got ADD. What was your question again? I wanted to be sure I'm answering.
The procrastination portion of it.
I don't actually have ADD, but I think I say I do now. I didn't used to, but I feel like I do. I'm teasing. Mm-hmm.
I got you. Well,
the procrastination.
One side you have the impulsive side, and then the other where it's like, let me marinate on that. I'm going to procrastinate. I'm not going to move forward with that. I see it from both sides.
Exactly. Well, say in his he has a really interesting book called Healing ADD, or I think it's still called ADD because I used to call it that instead of ADHD. And he, by brain specs, he breaks it down to about 6, 7 types of ADD. And the one I'm thinking of that relates to your question is the more temporal, the temporal lobe in your brain, where usually there's time management is there, what's on your radar to take care of things. And people can be sluggish in that area, not just sluggish, say, in the frontal lobes, but sluggish in the temporal. And when they, nothing's really on their radar, for time. And they just don't have a sense of caring about it because it's just sluggish. And so that can be something, but any of the things that you do for yourself will help with that type of it as well.
How about some suggestions in general? I mean, you mentioned before making lists, staying on task when you have ADHD. And that's my first question. The second one, in my understanding, it is hereditary. What are your thoughts there too?
Yes, it does tend to run in families. So that's one way you can that's why I think sometimes people, when they're adults, their child will be having some problems at school, and maybe a teacher will mention, I think maybe you could get him checked out for ADHD and find out that he has it. But then you've got the same symptoms, growing up and so on, when it wasn't so as popular to address it. And you go and you find out that you got it yourself, so sometimes you find out later, like you said, as an adult, that maybe you've been having this. So, I mean, I would recommend the book, Daniel Amon's book, ADD. It actually has the questionnaire in there, and you can actually score it for his different types of ADD. Some people, for example, their limbic system is overactivated. Some people have emotional types of ADHD, or they're like their whole brain, like in a bipolar type of thing, is overactivated. So they may act impulsively from that, or their limbic system, their emotional system is overactivated. And so they perceive threat quickly and kind of react, fight or flight. And that your brain's full of adrenaline, you're not thinking, more scattered. Anxiety centers could be up. There's different types he has. But that book, I'm sorry, looks like you want to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, what is the difference, if any, ADD and ADHD? The H is hyperactivity, right?
Correct. And they used to have it in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual as the ADD, attention deficit disorder. And you could either have it as being just inattentive. Some people are more inattentive, but they're not hyperactive with it, or they don't have the physical symptoms stuff, like, running around the classroom or whatever it might be. They're just kind of inattentive, and they go unnoticed and not get help because they're just sitting there nicely. But now they've changed the name in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders to ADHD. And so so you can have the inattentive type more, or you can have the type with the hyperactivity, but it's all called ADHD now. So
it's interesting you say that with the hyperactivity thing. A lot of kids are very hyperactive when they're younger. And as I've learned here, I used to think my friend's son may have had ADHD because at 6 years old, he was like all over the place. And as I've learned in the last couple of years, that many times it's not even ADHD or anything close to it. It's because boys are so much more, let me see if I can phrase this, emotionally intelligent than girls when they're younger, and they don't know how to deal with it. They're far superior than we give boys credit for. And then it's also suppressed, where people say big boys don't cry. And then you get a kid who's just, he's emotional because boys are more, according to some research that I've heard. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, I think that's very interesting. Can you talk more about that? Where did you hear that? I mean, generally, it's thought that boys are more physically active than girls, and girls are more sedentary. So that, when they're young, they're going to be more physically active. But you're saying, tell us more about that, about the emotional sense or intelligence.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who told me that. It's somebody who deals with children. Um, they might be a coach or of that
Mhm.
level, but they were making it their life's work, even writing a book about it. That it's never talked about, but if you look into research, that boys when they're, let's say even 3, 4, 5, 6, emotionally they're so much more developed than girls at that age, but they're not mature enough to know how to deal with the emotions.
Mhm.
They can process it or they can understand it, that I have this emotion, but I don't know what to do with it. What happens? They just go crazy in terms of hyperactivity because they're not really sure, how to process it. But and it would be our thought that girls would be, more emotionally intelligent. But it's really not the case. We have to Google that even more. And this is something
Yes, that would
last
be
year I heard.
be interesting. Can you give me an example of that? Like what you're thinking, an example of that emotion. So you're saying that the emotional sensitivity, they're picking up on other people's, emotions, for
Yeah.
example.
Yep.
And then they don't really know how to, what to
Process it.
do with it, how to process it. And so they get stressed in a sense. Are you saying? I mean, that they're more, they get they express it. Well, children in general will express things through physical, through
Yes.
their physical. And that's why we use play therapy with children. Children may not come in and talk about their feelings and their problems, but if you sit them down with a little dollhouse, little toy house, toy figures in a school and a bus and the house with all the family and the doggy and everything, they'll play out stories that will usually show what's on their mind, what is bothering them. Or if they'll just come home from school and they're in their little playroom area and they'll be, if they're worried about school, maybe they'll set up their dolls and they'll be the teacher, and it's their way of acting out their anxieties or what's on their mind, and you can kind of observe it.
Hmm.
Um,
And take
and
that to another level. Let's say a child, a boy's parents are, um, maybe they're not getting along sometimes. Maybe there's some
right,
discussion in the house.
exactly.
That can be emotional now to a boy who, according to this research and what I've heard,
Uh-huh.
is more intelligent emotionally, but not in terms of how to process it. Then they turn hyperactive. That's the only way that they, I guess, burn off the emotion or how to deal with it.
Right,
Short of crying. And then what happens again? We have a boy who cries. Was the first got big boys don't cry. There's been songs
right,
made about it.
right,
So from our culture, uh, generations ago, boys have been told to suppress their emotions.
right,
You got to be a man. You're 7 years old. Yeah, be a man.
right,
But that's not the reality. They're
right.
they're more sensitive according to all of this.
Yes, and then they, that can be a way children sometimes get triangulated into their parents' problems, where they will act out to kind of get focus off of their parents arguing. Like they become kind of can be a scapegoat, for, kind of deflecting or getting people to
Yeah.
look at their
It's
problems.
yeah, I totally gotcha. And yes, maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's not, but totally what you're saying there is, if you hear you're a child, you hear your parents maybe having a discussion, maybe an argument, whatever it might be, then you
Mhm.
create a ruckus over here because you're
Right,
trying to break them apart and put the focus over here, as opposed to being focused on the whatever's going on there, whatever challenges they're going
right,
through.
that your parents might be breaking up or something, that they're
Right.
fighting and
Yeah.
not wanting, so taking it on yourself instead, right,
Yeah.
acting out to get the attention
And
on.
all of this that we're talking about goes to one thing, and that is that, and we've talked about this before, how much of what children deal with in their early years, 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, whatever it is,
Absolutely.
they take with them in their subconscious.
Exactly.
And then they deal with that later in life. We're out of time. I just keep
Oh,
going here.
wow.
just like zooms on by.
Yeah.
No pun intended. What's the best way to find you, Ann? If we're talking about ADHD and a lot of other stuff today, including supplements, and you went down to fish oil already.
Yeah, and ADHD is one of my specialty areas too. So
how do we connect?
Just go to my website, Psychologist in Virginia, all spelled out in plural, .com. And it should have all my info right on there. Or go by my name, Ann Creekmore, probably find me.
and also, just to share, you have some really great books, especially Love Your Life, or Love Yourself, Love Your Life, which the information is available there, and also on Amazon under your pen name, which is your maiden name, AP Filosa, right?
Correct. You got it.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Great talking with you, Ann. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Great talking to you too.
You too. We'll catch up soon. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.